Good afternoon. Good afternoon, CTS alumni community, and welcome to our alumni speaker series. This is actually our final speaker series for this school year, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come back together with our community as we have spent the last several months focused on topics and issues that are really relevant to our alumni community. Those of you who are in ministerial leadership, pastoral leadership, those of you who are therapists, those of you who are chaplains, we've just been really intentional over this past year to address topics and issues that have been relevant for you as we have come together virtually as a community over this past year. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to come back together again this afternoon for our final panel. And today's panel is Fortifying Pastoral Leadership, the first season project. So you see here on the screen, I'm blessed to be joined by our panelists this afternoon. And so we're just going to engage in a dialogue and talk about the first season project and their experience with it over this past year. But before we get into our dialogue, I do want to have the opportunity to introduce our panelists. And so our first panelist really needs no introduction for the CTS community, Dr. Bill Kincaid. Dr. Kincaid is the Harold B. Monroe Professor of Leadership and Ministry Studies at CTS. He teaches a variety of courses related to pastoral leadership, congregational dynamics and mission, contextual engagement and spirituality. His course, Pastoral Leadership Across Difference and Polarization, identifies pastoral wisdom in church and community practices to engage political polarization, religious extremism, sexuality, generational differences, racial divides, and economic disparities constructively and prophetically. Dr. Kincaid is the author of several books. His most recent book is Letters to the Church, Engagement and Encouragement for the 2020 Election. We know that was a big one. Welcome, Dr. Kincaid. Our next panelist is Reverend Paula Pettis Garrett. Reverend Paula Pettis Garrett is an ordained minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. She serves as associate pastor and interim music director at Avon Christian Church in Avon, Indiana. Reverend Paula graduated from CTS in 2018 with a Master of Divinity degree. She is also a licensed clinical social worker, earning both her bachelor's and master's degrees in social work from Indiana University. Reverend Paula has been married to Reverend Steve Garrett for nearly 24 years, and they have 3 wonderful children, Janiyah, Mia, and Stephen Jr., and 1 grandson, Ryan. In her downtime, she enjoys reading, binge watching crime dramas, and having fun with family and friends. Welcome, Paula. Our next panelist is Reverend Megan Turner. Reverend Megan Turner began her full-time ministry at Northway Christian Church in Dallas, Texas, in December 2016. And Megan received her BA in Religious Studies from TCU and her Master of Divinity from Bright Divinity School in Fort Worth. Prior to joining the Northway staff, she served as a house parent for a foster group home, a pediatric chaplain for Cook Children's, and a local hospice agency, as well as serving as a child protective service investigator. She provides pastoral care, leadership, and oversight for ministries to children from birth to 5th grade, as well as their families. Welcome, Megan. And then our last panelist is Reverend Jamie Henson Rieker. Reverend Jamie Henson Rieker is a graduate of Indiana Purdue, Fort Wayne, and a 2020 graduate of CTS. He serves as minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Indianapolis. He will be formally ordained to the Unitarian Universalist Ministry in the fall, a church whose theme is a church of a warm heart, open mind, and helping hands, located just minutes from the Butler University campus. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whether you worship many gods, one God, or no God, you are welcome here. And whether you walk in on little feet, stroll in, or roll in, you are welcome here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Indianapolis. Welcome, Jamie. And I just absolutely love that theme, so I had to share that. It's just absolutely beautiful, and just the inclusive nature of our faith. So again, as we shared earlier, you all have been blessed to be a part of this initiative that Bill, the impetus for it. I'm excited to just hear about the first season project and just hear about your journey over the past year as we were all just sharing. What a year. What a year we've had. What a year we have all experienced. And prayerfully, we are moving into a post-pandemic space in our next normal. But just having an opportunity just to reflect on what did ministry look like over this past year. So before we get into our dialogue, Bill, I would love for you to just share with us, with our community and the audience, about the First Season Project and really what was the impetus for this initiative.
April, thank you so much for having us this afternoon. It's great to be with all of you who are viewing, who are tuning in. And as you could hear in the brief bios of Paula, Megan, and Jamie, what rich paths to ministry and what rich expressions of ministry they are involved in. Every pursuit, every vocation, every profession involves more learning beyond the formal preparation, beyond the formal education. And that often happens best in a consistent community with colleagues who are on a very similar path. And that sums up First Season Project. It's that transition into ministry is an interest and a commitment of mine in my teaching and in my writing. And it's a joy for me to be alongside these new pastors who are in their, quote, first season of ministry. Now, opinions vary on how long that first season is, but we're talking about a transition into ministry where patterns for a lifetime in ministry get set, healthy, constructive patterns, and not just set, but people begin to live into them in very hopeful and healing ways. And so First Season Project accompanies new pastors through the first 3 to 5 years of ministry. We have 20 new pastors in the group. 9 are CTS graduates, but there are 8 other seminaries represented in the group. There are 9 different church traditions in the group, and we stretch from Cleveland through Indiana and Illinois to Dallas to Denver. And so to have the chance to accompany these new pastors is just such a privilege, and it is such an investment on the part of CTS and a commitment on the part of CTS, both to them and to the church. A brief word about what we do. We meet 2 to 3 times a year for retreats, all of which have been in Zoom so far, but wonderful community has been formed over the last year through these Zoom retreats. We also have monthly small group meetings that are mentored by 2 terrific CTS graduates, Mindy Mays and Jen Riddle. Going in, as we began, the mentors and I, Jen, Mindy, and I wanted to be initial resource people. But what we wanted to have happen has already begun to happen in that the new pastors are resourcing each other, building community, supporting each other, asking important questions, and being present in ways. So it's a wonderful group to work with, and it's a wonderful expression on CTS's part of our commitment to pastoral ministry and to the church.
Now, I am the one who knows not to mute her mic, but thank you so very much, Bill, for sharing that. It's just wonderful to hear about the thought process and really establishing this and the need for it and the CTS's investment and knowing the importance of it. I often say that leadership many times is isolating. that you can be in a role and you feel like you are the only one experiencing what you're experiencing, but that's never the truth, because there are others who are in those same roles. And so when we think about the role of ministry and stepping into ministry, I just think it's so very wonderful and powerful to bring ministers together like this. So that's great. So I wanted to pose a question to our panelists, just getting some additional background and asking you, how did you get involved with the First Season Project? Megan, can you answer for us first?
I didn't mute myself. I got connected with Bill and the First Seasons Project through Kim Ryan, who is the director of Bethany Fellows. I had the pleasure of participating in the Excellence in Ministry program that is through the Disciples Pension Fund. And she connected me with Bill as a way to continue those healthy retreat practices and self-care moving forward.
Great, thank you. And it's wonderful for you to say those words. We've been speaking the word self-care a lot over these last few months, specifically in the speaker series. And what does ministerial self-care look like, and why it's so important to have that. So thank you for sharing. Jamie?
Sure. So I'm a graduate of Christian Theological Seminary, as you mentioned, and I was privileged to have several classes with Dr. Kincaid. It feels weird to me to call him Bill, but I'm working on it. So I was privileged to have several classes with Bill, all of which were in different ways about flourishing in ministry, personally and professionally. And they were just such fabulous classes. So when Bill said, "Hey, I've got this project that we're creating. Are you interested in participating?" Honestly, it could have been called the "Let's sit down and read the phone book together" project. And I would have been like, "Yes, I'm in. Absolutely. Sign me up." But it's been fantastic. So I'm very, very grateful to be a part of the First Season Project.
Great. Thank you. I love it. The phone book. How about for you, Paula?
Similar to Jamie, I received a direct email from Dr. Kincaid, and I'm not working on calling him Bill, by the way. I'm fine with Dr. Kincaid. So just a one-on-one personal email to explain what happened, but kind of like Jamie, it was just like, "What did you say? Support? I'm in."
Good. That's wonderful. Yes, that is so great. And just right on time, for this time as we entered into, I've said all year, I've said unprecedented 45 million times more than I have in my life, but we have experienced an unprecedented time. So it's such a wonderful time to come together. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill, because he knows some of the experiences that you all have experienced. And we were talking a little bit before we came live about some of your journeys this year, but just want to hear a little bit more about what you experienced during this year.
I want to mention something that Megan mentioned specifically, and which is that there are, thankfully, other transition into ministry programs, including Bethany Fellows, which has been doing this work for 20 years, the Disciples Pension Fund, Excellence in Ministry. One of the things the First Season Project wanted to focus on is that not just new and young pastors, which is a really important calling, but we don't limit by age. And so one of the diversities that we enjoy in First Season Project is that we have new pastors who are in their mid to late 20s, and new pastors who are in every succeeding decade or 3 or 4 after that. I mean, very careful not to speak or even speculate on any age, but there is a richness there as well that we take into account and celebrate. And I just wanted to lift that up. A lot of people are doing incredible work with transition into ministry, and I'm just so pleased that we're one of those groups. So I want to invite the panelists to reflect or to share first on just some of the experiences and challenges and opportunities you've had in ministry so far. It's been quite a year, as April mentioned. And I think it's good to hear that through these experiences, challenges, opportunities, that that you're with us today, that this call to ministry continues to be strong and stirring in your lives. So if everyone could just name a particular experience that you've had that perhaps some viewing might not even think of as pastors encountering. And Paula, would you be willing to go first? Because I know of maybe your top 5 or so.
Oh my gosh, there've been so many. Wow. I guess I'll just start with my entry into ministry. You know, this is my second career, if you will, or vocation. And so I feel like, in a sense, I was, about as green as you can be in ministry. And so my entry into pastoral ministry was the senior pastor leaving 6 weeks after I came, with no replacement, no interim replacement. And so that is something, I know I'm not alone in that. I have heard others have had that experience, but that is the top one, top number one that I will list, is just being able to, I guess, get tried by fire in a sense, is what has happened. And so it has allowed me to grow, I think, a little bit quicker than if I had that pastor, that person, or that mentor walking beside me. I actually was able to grow a little bit faster, mature a little bit faster in ministry, and especially in ministerial leadership, of trying to lead a congregation and, coming fresh out of school. So that's my top number one challenge.
Thank you, Paula. Jamie?
Thanks. So I think that my situation is such that I was already serving this congregation full time as I was going through seminary, first as an internship and then just as a contract ministry. So I had a reasonably grounded sense of how to do kind of the nuts and bolts of ministry. And then the pandemic came along and threw that all into uncertainty, right? Like the board made the decision that we were going to close the campus on Thursday, and by that Sunday we were doing this new thing called Zoom. And I think I had first gotten onto Zoom like Friday, right? So the tremendous amount of technical adaptation we've had to do has been a challenge, also interesting and invigorating. But I think for me, the biggest challenge of this year has been that sort of paradoxically remembering that the technical adaptations and all of that are not really the heart of ministry, right? So it's been watching my people go through this just so much uncertainty and so much change and so much anxiety. And you could kind of see that sometimes these sort of waves of anxiety would go through the congregation. And knowing that this is a year in which a ministry of presence and a ministry of compassion and journeying with is so much more important than whether or not we got the Zoom worship perfect or whether or not we're doing this or that technical thing. And then just being mindful that that same wave of anxiety is like going through my own body, right? I would say that self-care has been a consistent challenge this year because it's just easy to get pulled in so many directions in this Zoom crazy journey of a year that we've had.
Thank you. Megan?
Well, I never wanted to be a congregational minister. That when I went to seminary, that was not my goal. And it, in fact, was not only not my goal, I said, I will never be in congregational ministry. And in 2016, I found myself in congregational ministry. And so, I believe that it was a God thing that I ended up here. But on a full staff that had been there 20 years, 16 years, 13 years, the youth minister had grown up there. So I was one of 5 ministers, and a year and a half in, everybody left. Our senior pastor retired after 21 years, and the youth minister went to go to a new church that he hadn't grown up in, which was, right and good. And the executive minister took a senior pastor position somewhere else. And so through that transition, I became the longest tenured pastor in this congregation that had the same pastors for forever. And we went from this congregation is 113 years old, and we had only had 3 pastors in the last 80 years because all of those pastors had long tenures. And we called an African-American woman, and it was the first time we'd had a female pastor. It was the first time that we'd had a person of color as a pastor. And then, and she was here for about a year, and the pandemic hit. And so we were already in the middle of transition. All of the pastors besides me were new, and we were in this process of dreaming and visioning and ready to make transitions. And then the pandemic hit, and everything kind of got put on the back burner to pivot to be church together. And I think particularly when in last June, when George Floyd passed, was murdered, and the country finally came to grips with the situation that we're in as a nation with our race relations. The way we navigated that was very different than it would have been with our previous ministers. We're a predominantly white congregation. And it became an opportunity for us to finally have some conversations that we had never had before. And as that is my particular passion, in seminary, I got a concentration in Black church studies. I'm married to a Black man. My children are brown. And so race relations and the way that the church interacts with that, and the way the church addresses that, is something that's always been a passion, and not something that I'd ever been able to really address as a pastor in this congregation. And so I'm the minister to children and families, but my portfolio, my ministry really transformed over the last year. And so not only did I not intend to be in congregational ministry, but now I'm in congregational ministry in a predominantly white congregation, and really tackling anti-racism and what that looks like for us as a people of faith, and how we do that in a faithful way, and what our theology, what our faith tells us about how we participate in it. So it's been my whole ministry here has been constant transition, and it's challenged me and pushed me and stretched me in ways that I never really even could have fathomed.
Thank you very much, Megan. And thanks all 3 of you. Each of you highlighted the fact that a transition into ministry doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. That a diagram can be drawn where a transition in the ministry is just one piece of it, in the midst of congregational transitions, in the midst of societal transitions, and many of them are of a very significant and urgent kind of dimension. And so, it might be different if we had like a transition into ministry hallway that we could walk down and get to the other end. But it wouldn't be, as Paula talked about her acceleration soon after arriving at Avon. Ministry doesn't happen in isolation or theoretically. And so, so thanks to all of you for highlighting not just something out of your own transition, but a reminder that much of what we're learning in addition to ourselves is paying attention to other individuals' transitions and cultural transitions and so forth. So thank you. April?
Yeah, definitely. Just powerful ways to share what you all have experienced. And I often say, God is so very intentional. So it's on purpose that you are in the roles that you're in. And I also say that God thinks he's a comedian sometimes because the things we say we're not going to do, that's exactly where he positions us, as Megan has shared, because that is where he can really use us. So I laugh a lot. I do say, God, you think you're funny, and it's not funny, but the blessing is he's using you all in such meaningful ways in those challenges and transitions in that movement. And I think that just speaks to what our community needs on an ongoing basis, as Dr. Kincaid shared about the fact that even with the First Season Project, you have pastors that are in their 20s and pastors that are what I call my wisdom pastors. And so, recognizing that those journeys are very individual. And I've been so very blessed over this past year. I've been blessed to interview so many CTS alumni and write articles about their journeys. And that is so very powerful. And it's always very unique. But we all know it starts out with a call. It always starts with a call. If we choose to answer that call immediately is a question, which many have said to me, no, I did not choose to answer that call, but it always starts with a call. And then we just never know how that journey is going to look. So something that was shared with me about First Season Project that I thought was so very powerful, given the unique context of the year we've just experienced. You all met, I think, in person once, Bill. Was it one time? No, all online. Okay. So all online, but you were still able to develop community across that. So talk to us a little bit about that community experience and how you all have supported each other. Paula?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I feel like the particular peer group that I'm in, we have a special bond. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. This is all new. Forming relationships online, but I feel like it's really genuine, as if we were in person. And so I know personally, the fact that we may actually get to see each other in September, it is just so exciting, because it's like family that I haven't seen for a while. I get to go see my family, or I get to go see my long lost friends. And so people are very supportive. It's definitely a judgment-free zone, because we're all, in a sense, we're all living the same life. We understand. That is the good thing about this program, is that we all understand, because most of the other people in our lives have no idea. They can kind of try to relate or compare, their whatever, to our walk in ministry. But like with every profession, it's just a different journey. And so seeing as how I've been on the outside of, I'll call it sacred ministry versus my secular ministry, it's different. It is just different. And people just, people don't get it. And so this group has just, I don't know, we've just really bonded. I feel like I have new cousins. And, we've all gone through all kinds of things. I mean, myself, I've had losses, with COVID and some health issues and just of course, the pandemic as far as ministry and then personal effect, oh my gosh, we're there for each other. So it really, really means a lot because everybody still has their normal life while they're still doing ministry. And so it is a very supportive, very nurturing, and is resource sharing, as Dr. Kincaid mentioned. So it is everything right now.
That is wonderful. That's wonderful to hear. It's almost like having a virtual arms are wrapped around you.
Yes.
To support you as you go through this. How about for you, Jamie?
Yeah, I would echo that. I really appreciate the structure of the first season project where we come together for these retreats, and the retreats offer a lot of resources and a lot of information and a lot of specific tools for support. And then aside from that, we have these monthly small group check-ins. And I've really, really benefited from the specific resources, particularly like they provide us with some spiritual direction, and like I have a wellness app on my phone, right? And all these kinds of things. But one of the things that's really just been most powerful is getting together with my small group once a month, and we share. And then, at the end of every session, we go in a circle and we pray for each other. Mm-hmm. And just having colleagues praying for me and praying for colleagues, and knowing that relationship exists, and that there are people that are praying with me through this is really powerful. It's really powerful.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful. I think what I'm hearing too is the opportunity to have this sacred and safe space where you can support each other and come together. How about for you, Megan?
I will echo what they said. And I think that one of the reasons that the First Seasons project for me has been particularly unique is that, throughout seminary, throughout ministry, you develop support systems and cohorts and the people in your region, in your area that you go to. I think there's something special about having this group of people that I would not have otherwise been connected to outside of the denomination, outside of my region, outside of the small circle. I think there's something about not just the fresh perspective from those different denominations and from different regions and from different areas, but also that the world is small. It's kind of like ministry, sort of like a small town where everybody knows your business. And sometimes there are things that you just can't share with the people that are in your, because they know all of the other players. And so when you have this diverse group from other areas, it's a way to really be able to get fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and to be able to have safe space that you can truly process what you need to process with all of, confidentiality is always there, but right. Knowing that there's no bias, it's completely, it's just a completely fresh space to be able to process what you need to. And ministry is hard. And like Paula said, having people who are going through it is important, who know the specifics of ministry, the specifics of congregational ministry in particular. Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you. I've always wondered, and I've said this out loud before, who do pastors talk to? Who do pastors talk to? Because unless you're bringing it all home to your spouse, which I know that often happens, but who can you feel comfortable you really sharing those things that you're experiencing in your ministerial journey? So it's just wonderful to hear about that from the group. So I'll turn it back over to Bill.
Thank you. I want to mention a couple of times when early on that I realized that that the potential for something special was rather quickly being fulfilled. One is, and it may seem like a small thing, but for those who've had significant experience on Zoom, which is most people by now, we were together in May of 2020 for our very first retreat. And at that point, I believe there were 17 in the group, along with the two mentors, Mindy and Jen, and myself. I happened to know everyone on the screen because I had talked with everyone. But there were several recent CTS graduates who knew each other, some really well, but most knew at least of each other. It was a really special moment when at some time during that 3-day retreat that people who had not met in person began to talk to each other and call each other by name across the screen in places. And I thought, okay, there's connecting that's happening here. This matters enough to reach out within the group and to call each other by name, and the sense of connection and hospitality that was going on there is just really powerful. The second is there have been several times in the whole group retreats, and then even more so in the small groups, where it's a sacred space, it's a safe space, and because it's those things, we have engaged in truth telling that further revealed that this matters, that we matter to each other, that ministry matters, that the church still has a voice and witness in the world. And that kind of truth telling doesn't happen in every group. And it doesn't happen apart from a commitment to each other and to the group and to our callings. And so those were moments when I just became so excited with this group and for this group to see the connections being made and this leaning into community that people have done without exception, really. So I just wanted to celebrate those things. Jamie mentioned something that I want to highlight. Because of the resources we have for First Season Project, thanks to the generosity of the Lilly Endowment, we're able to offer to everyone in the group 2 complimentary spiritual direction sessions. And I believe at this point we're getting close to half of the group having taken advantage of those. It's exciting to see. It's a new thing for many, maybe for everyone who's taken advantage of it. But one of the things we wanted to do, along with the silence that happens within our retreats, is to support new pastors in something new and fresh, and so to offer them these 2 sessions of spiritual direction. In some cases, people have said that was very nice. I'm so glad for the 2 sessions. And then moved on to something else. And in some cases, they have continued the spiritual direction sessions. And so that's been something that I think has just been, I trust from what I've heard back, very, very beneficial to the group. I want to ask the panelists, in thinking about the content, we have fellowship time and worship time and time of silence. And in thinking about the content, we've done a session with the National Director of the Economic Challenges Facing Pastoral Leaders program, and a session with Matt Bloom on flourishing in ministry, which flagged for all of us the wellness app. A session on the Enneagram, actually multiple sessions within one retreat. We also had a session in early February of this year to help all of us think about trauma and secondary trauma. And so those are 4 content pieces that we've had. And so I just invite anyone who wants to share about any of those, if one particularly resonated with you, or if you found one particularly helpful, then I invite you to share that.
Okay, I'll go.
Please.
The Enneagram. Oh my gosh. I had tried to take it on my own before at home, and people had talked about it, and I still couldn't quite capture what it meant. And it would just give me like my top 3. But going through it, I can't remember his name, but going through it, going through those sessions, I mean, for real, it really was life-changing. I consider myself to be pretty aware. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I like to know why people do what they do. I believe that nothing happens without a reason. So, my thing is why. If I'm feeling a certain way and I can't quite figure it out, I literally take time to process and figure, okay, what's going on? What's different? What am I doing? What am I not doing? Why am I feeling this way? And so, oh my gosh, it really was life-changing for me. It opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, to just some more explanation of why I do what I do and how far back it really has gone. So the sessions with him, talking it through, not just on your own, him talking it through and answering all our questions and all of our doubts that we had about, no, that can't be me. That can't be me. It really was, seriously, it really was life-changing for me. It just gave me so much explanation and really what my real limitations are for real, that I know I need to work on. And, those qualities that are working for me, to boost those and build those up. So that was life-changing.
Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you. Megan or Jamie? Jamie?
Yeah, I can share. So I also had a similar experience with the Enneagram. I mean, I came into the session knowing, confident with what my Enneagram number was, because I'd gone through a process before, and it wasn't something that I was hugely invested in. But over the course of the presentation, they were talking about, some of the challenges that someone with my number might be experiencing. And I kept saying, I'm confident I'm a 5, but these challenges that you're talking about, I just cannot relate to this at all. And then the person said, well, let me give it just a little tweak on the language. And then I was like, oh, I totally do that. You are so wow. It just totally unfolded this whole layer. It's like, oh, that is so me. That's amazing. And now I'm still reflecting on what that means. So that was really powerful. And then I'll say, a lot of the tools are just evergreen tools that you come back to again and again and again. I mean, I've got, I was just actually, Dr. Kincaid, Bill hasn't mentioned his book, Stepping into a Canoe, or at least we haven't recently, but I was just returning to that book today. I'm reading one of the chapters to reinforce something that I was reflecting on in prayer this morning. The wellness app has been helpful. There was an article about the 6 stages of recovering from a pandemic that I was just revisiting, which is really relevant as we're preparing to reopen. So it's just been a great set of resources that I know I'm going to carry with me and revisit for many, many years. So it's been a real gift.
Thank you, Jamie. Megan?
Well, I hate to harp on the same one, but the Enneagram piece was particularly powerful for me because I was in a time where I was struggling interpersonally with in several different areas, and personally, but also with colleagues, and trying to figure out how to navigate some of those relationships, because the pandemic has changed the way that we relate to each other. And so one of the things that I really appreciated about the way that this was laid out was looking at the challenges, as Jamie said, but not necessarily for myself, but being able to understand some of the people that I relate to better. And that's one of the things that I love about the Enneagram, is that it not only helps you to understand yourself and your own motivations and the ways that we get tripped up, but also the ways that we relate to other people. And it was eye-opening and life-changing, because it helped me to change the way that I interact with those people. I mean, even my daughter, even my 5-year-old daughter, I was able to be like, I see this. And I'll just say she's an 8. And one of the things that they talked about is that 8s don't want to be controlled. And so the other day when I was, she was getting back into the pool for the first time, and I was trying to give her instructions, and she was getting so mad and doing what she wanted to do. And I said, sweetheart, I'm not trying to control you. I just want to keep you safe. And so when I tell you these things, it's not because I want to control you. It's because I want to keep you safe. And all of a sudden we were fine. And she was listening. And I've been beating my head over against a wall for so long with her around safety issues. And to frame it that way with those words made an impact. And that's something that I picked up at our Enneagram. And I keep going back to that. And just giving a new appreciation for people and the ways that we interact with each other and what our motivations are, and being able to speak into that not only helps us to interact with each other, but it allows us to pour into each other in different ways, to feed those places that need to be fed, so that that we're loving each other better. And I think that that's a whole lot of what ministry is, not just with the people that we're ministering to, but our colleagues and our families. Being able to pour life into each other is profound.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks to all of you. What wonderful reflections. Thank you. April?
Definitely. Yes. Thank you for sharing. And just sounds like there has been such powerful introspection in this journey, and really being able to reflect inwardly, as you shared, Megan, then that reflects outwardly of how we interact with not only those that you all lead in ministry, but your families and, the broader community. And I think I haven't taken it. I need to. I guess I do. I've taken other things, and I kind of know myself well, but that's something I'll think about engaging in as well. Something that you all raised also was talking about the experiences that you had around flourishing in ministry. And I hear the wellness app has come up a couple of times. And so the CTS community knows over the last few months, really since January, we started an initiative around addressing ministerial burnout. And what does that mean for self-care, mind, body, spirit, and soul, and engaging in the spiritual disciplines that strengthen us. And as you know, with CTS, we have the clergy renewal program. We have pastors that have been in ministry for many years. My own pastor just started his 6-month sabbatical after fighting for 10 years to do it. Pastor Jeffrey A. Johnson Sr. I'm going to call him out because I love him very much, and so grateful that he is on his Sabbath. I'm sorry, on his sabbatical for the next 6 months. And so he's at one end of the spectrum, because he has been in ministry for more than 30 years. And you guys are at the other end of the spectrum. But the message is pretty consistent that there are challenges around self-care. So share with us a little bit about just what you all have done and learned as a group about the importance of taking the best care of self so that you really can serve in ministry. Jamie, I'll start with you.
So it's definitely been something that's been a challenge for me. I'm an over-functioner, and I tend to over-function, particularly in response to anxiety. And this has been an anxious year, right? When there's uncertainty, I want to do things. And so some of for the most part, it's just been this sort of constant rebalancing, right? Things get a little out of whack, and then I stop and I recenter and I bring back into balance. Congregational life, I think, tends to pull us all a little off balance in this regard anyway. It's not really set up to encourage good self-care. Oftentimes the demands of ministry are pretty significant, and they pull you in a lot of different directions. So I think, honestly, one of the things that's been most helpful with that is just the structure, right? Like, I'm coming into this year of ministry with this structure of retreats and check-ins and shared wisdom in place. And that structure has been so helpful to me, just as a constant reminder to return to this practice, to pay attention to when I get off balance and to rebalance. And it's certainly something that I'm still learning and still practicing and still growing in. But it just really helps to have colleagues and this structure. This structure has been so helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Megan?
Early on in my ministry, my daughter was very sick and ended up having to be hospitalized several times. And I had come from corporate ministry, chaplaincy, and CPS, and self-care wasn't a thing that was taught in those spaces. And I remember my senior pastor, when I was trying to talk to him about the ways that I was going to try to be present, said to me, if our children and families pastor can't model what it looks like to take care of families first, to take care of your family first, then how are you going to minister to the children and families that are in your care? And it was powerful, and it stayed with me constantly, sort of haunts me when I know that I'm not doing what I need to do. But it's hard to do. Most churches aren't set up, even the ones, even this one where he said that, it's still not set up for self-care unless you claim it for yourself. And so I'm so incredibly grateful for not just the reminder and the permission that the First Seasons Project gives to get away and to care for ourselves and to have those monthly check-ins and have the retreats, but also for the way that it forces it. For our last retreat that was virtual, I got a cabin in the woods and went away because that's what a retreat is. And I would have never done that before participating in EIM and First Seasons Project. It would have never occurred to me that was important. But it's not just a reminder. This is required, or you're not going to be able to succeed.
Thank you, Megan. I love that, the fact that you were intentional too about going away and having that time away and separating yourself for that time, and just recognizing, definitely in ministry, it's very hard to practice that self-care, but it's imperative. That's what I keep seeing, that it's imperative to be able to do that. How about for you, Paula?
As my previous occupation, I taught it and preached it all the time to other people about taking care of themselves and self-care. And, that's something that's just one of those things that's really important to me, that people are whole, and that's one of the focuses of my ministry, is to walk with people on their journey toward wholeness. And so my first year here was just, so adventurous and so interesting that I did not take the time to get away, to do. It was just, it was just different. It was as different as this last pandemic year has been. It was that kind of different. And so I didn't focus on it. But within the last year and a half for sure, I have been intentional. And I would say that First Season Project had a hand in that, had a play in that, because you're constantly hearing it. You're constantly hearing other people either say they're doing it or they need it. And so that's something that I have done intentionally. I feel like last year was, however you want to say it, whatever. Last year was about getting back to the basics of life. It was getting back to what is important. We have houses and we have cars, and there was nothing we could do. We couldn't invite anybody in, and we couldn't go out, in our fancy cars. So that kind of stuff did not matter anymore. And so having all that happened, having the deaths and all of that happened last year has made me be really intentional. So I have invested, financially in regular self-care, physically, regular self-care. And then I do lots of other things emotionally and spiritually to make sure I'm feeding myself. I know when to say when, and I know when I'm getting to that breaking point of, that's it. Cut it off. That's enough. I can't do anymore. And so, so it has been more intentional. I have heard, we've all heard the statistics and all that kind of stuff. We've seen people, dropping like flies, basically, out of ministry. And I don't want that to be me. I want to be able to fulfill God's will for my life as long as God wants me to. I don't want it to have to be cut off because of some health issue, whichever area of health it is.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, that is, the hidden blessing of the pandemic. It forced us to change. We had no choice. And so I do try to look at the blessings of even the most challenging experiences that we had, but we had to recalibrate. We had to change, and I'm prayerful that, again, as we go into this post-pandemic world, whatever that looks like, that we take those lessons with us. And it sounds like you all have done that in being very intentional. And I always say self-care is a journey. It's a process. I say oftentimes that I have to recalibrate, but my goal is to stay calibrated, but I haven't reached that goal of staying calibrated yet. But just being very intentional and very passionate about ensuring no matter what year or you are in your ministry, it's pivotal, whether it's at the beginning or you've been in ministry for 30 years. How do you ensure you do that? So we are actually coming up to the end of our hour together. I always say this time flies so very quickly, and so grateful to come together with you all this afternoon. I had two final questions. The first question is an easy one. And then the next one, the final question I will give to Bill. But the first question is, would you all recommend that other ministers, pastors join something like the First Season Project? Is that just a universal? Yes.
Yep.
I say that because as we look into going into this next year, something that we are going to be intentional about at CTS is creating similar affinity groups and bringing individuals together, bringing chaplains together to support each other, bringing therapists together to support each other. And I just think this is such a blueprint for us to follow. So Bill, I'll be coming to your office sometime or calling you and figuring out how we can do this. Yeah, definitely being able to do that. And then lastly, I just want to hear from you, Bill, kind of what's next for the First Season Project as we wrap up.
Sure. The next step, just as last year, everyone, every MDiv or dual degree MDiv CTS graduate got an invitation to talk with me about First Season Project. So all of our MDiv or dual degree MDivs from the class of 2021 will get that invitation. We are incredibly enriched by the 8 other seminaries represented in our group. At the same time, our first offer goes to the graduates at Christian Theological Seminary. And so I look forward to those conversations. And while I'm wrapping up here, I just want to say thanks again to Paula, to Jamie, to Megan.
Thank you.
What incredible people and ministers you are. And so thank you so much for these reflections. And thanks to you, April. Wonderful to be with you as well.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much, you all, for joining us this afternoon. Such an important conversation. And it is my hope and prayer and intention that we continue these conversations because community is so very important. And we've seen over this last year, whether we can be in person or not, we can still support each other and be a community. So I'm grateful for that. And then excited about you all seeing each other in person in September. Yes. To have some in-person interaction will be a blessing as well. So we're just grateful for all those who have joined us this afternoon. Again, as I shared, as we look at this next school year, being very intentional about coming together and supporting both our students and our alumni community around this area. And recognizing that, again, as I shared, leadership can be isolating, but we're not in this alone. We're not in this alone, and we can come together and support each other. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Bill, for joining me again for one of these dialogues. And just thank you so very much for all those who have joined us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.